The elevator doors opened to the 12th floor, and I walked into the place I had helped build. For 8 years, the operations department at Argon Consulting had been my second home. I had designed its systems, hired most of its people, and fixed every crisis that others had caused. But lately, the smiles around me felt too polite, the hallway chatter too quiet when I entered. It started when 2 ambitious colleagues, Paula from Analytics and Raymond from Procurement, began staying late, holding strategy meetings without inviting me. They were friendly to my face, but I could sense the calculation behind every compliment. When our director announced his retirement, I knew what was coming. The following week, small changes appeared, my reports were misplaced, my name left off meeting invites. One afternoon, Paula suggested I take a break to avoid burnout. It sounded like concern, but her eyes gave her away. I smiled, thanked her, and decided not to fight it, not yet. People who rush to remove you often forget how much you quietly hold together. I began backing up every document, saving email trails, and keeping notes of every conversation. If they wanted my seat, I'd let them have it. But they'd also inherit everything I'd built, and everything they didn't understand. By March, the rumors became reality. HR called me in for a transition conversation. The new department head would be Paula, with Raymond as her deputy. I would support them for 3 months before moving to a strategic advisory role. They framed it as an opportunity. I treated it like confirmation. I thanked HR, shook hands, and left the office calmly. Inside, I was already writing my next move. That night, at my kitchen table, I drew a map of the department's systems, the contracts, the vendor pipelines, the project timelines only I truly knew. Paula and Raymond had pushed me aside to control budgets and clients they barely understood. They saw authority as power. I saw information as power. The next morning, I handed Paula a cheerful summary of pending tasks, neatly organized. "Everything's transparent," I told her. She smiled, relieved. She didn't realize transparency can be a trap when you can't read the fine print. While they celebrated their promotion, I quietly registered a consulting business under my own name. My exit would look like compliance. But my next steps would remind them what happens when you mistake quiet competence for weakness. During the transition, Paula tried to act gracious. She called me her mentor in front of staff but treated me like a shadow in private. Raymond copied her tone, too polite, too confident. They held long meetings without inviting me, then asked for summaries they hadn't earned. I provided everything they requested, precisely as asked, no more, no less. Behind the scenes, I removed my personal templates and replaced my automations with placeholders. I wasn't sabotaging them, I was simply giving them ownership of the systems they wanted. Every few days, Paula emailed me questions about vendor schedules or contract renewals. I answered briefly, always reminding her where the files were stored. She never realized those folders required updated credentials, ones HR would disable once my role ended. Outside work, I met with 2 clients I had introduced to Argon years earlier. I explained my coming consulting shift. Both asked for my new contact information. I gave it. I didn't recruit them, I just gave them options. By the end of month 2, Paula had what she wanted, control. I had what I needed, distance, data, and timing. Their countdown had already begun, they just didn't hear it ticking. My final week arrived. HR sent balloons, Paula organized a farewell lunch, and everyone pretended to be sentimental. I gave a short speech about growth and teamwork. People clapped politely, though half were glancing at Paula for cues. That evening, I stayed late one last time. The office was quiet, lights dim. I looked at the rows of desks, the glowing servers, the cabinets of archived files. This department had been my creation, a clean engine that ran because I knew when to oil each part. Before leaving, I checked the automated report scheduler. Paula had insisted on taking over those dashboards herself. I had given her full access, minus one small detail: the maintenance credentials were time-limited, expiring 30 days after my departure. Without renewal, the system would continue to send reports, but the data feeds would slowly corrupt. It wouldn't crash, it would decay, quietly, like fruit left on a shelf. I didn't smile. I simply locked my desk, left my access card, and walked out. At home, I placed my department badge in a drawer beside my new business license. Let them have the office politics. I had taken what mattered, the blueprint. 3 weeks later, the first cracks appeared. A former teammate called to ask if I knew why the quarterly vendor summaries were full of mismatched numbers. I didn't. Officially, I was gone. 2 days after that, Raymond sent me a message through LinkedIn, "Hope you're well. Quick question, do you recall how the supply portal authenticates vendor IDs?" I waited 3 hours before replying, "It should be in the operations manual." It wasn't. They had deleted that section when they streamlined the documents. By the second month, word spread that client invoices were delayed. Paula blamed the finance team, finance blamed her. Meanwhile, the clients I'd once handled directly began contacting me through my new consulting email. I didn't pitch. I simply answered their questions efficiently. One of them asked if I could temporarily oversee their account until Argon sorted things out. I agreed, under contract, at double my previous rate. The company that pushed me out was now paying my invoice indirectly. I didn't plan revenge, I planned precision. Paula wanted control. She had it. And control, without comprehension, was already turning to chaos. By early summer, Argon's name had begun slipping in client reviews. Delays, mixed communications, and failed audits crept into every corner of the operations wing. I didn't need inside reports to know, the signs were public. Clients complained online, vendors posted about payment issues, and turnover on LinkedIn told the rest of the story. I kept my distance. My new firm, Pierce Strategies, had secured 3 steady contracts by then. Each came from businesses I'd helped in the past, and all of them wanted the same thing, stability. That was something I knew how to deliver. One afternoon, I received an email from an old colleague, Hannah. She had been in finance, sharp but quiet. "Paula's panicking," she wrote. "The numbers don't add up, and the board's starting to ask questions." I read it twice, then deleted it. They had wanted independence from me. They had it. Still, part of me felt a small tug of disappointment. I had built something strong, and watching it corrode because of arrogance was like seeing an old house rot after you'd handed over the keys. But another part of me, the part that remembered every undermining whisper, stayed cold. They'd chosen this. And soon, so would the board. By August, I was invited to speak at a logistics conference. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me credibility. After my presentation, a man from Harbor and Kent Consulting approached me. "Didn't you used to be at Argon?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. "I helped design their operations framework." He nodded. "We've heard things are unstable there. They're trying to rebuild their systems from scratch." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He smiled. "If you're available, we might need your expertise." The next week, I signed a contract with Harbor and Kent to help optimize their supply workflows, the same system Argon had been struggling to maintain. Irony had a sense of humor. Around that time, Paula's LinkedIn updates grew desperate. "Exciting restructuring ahead," one post read. It reminded me of a sinking captain praising the sunset as the ship tilted. Hannah sent another short note, "Board review coming next week." I didn't reply. It wasn't my story anymore, but somehow, every decision they made still led them back to the foundations I had built. And without understanding those foundations, they were trapped in their own web. The board meeting was scheduled for a Thursday. That morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Naomi, it's Paula." Her voice carried a brittle edge, thin but urgent. I know this is awkward, but I could use your help. Something's wrong with the vendor system. Files are missing, payments are duplicating. I left full documentation, I said evenly. I know, but we can't access the central archive. It's locked somehow. We think maybe a password expired or... It's been 4 months, I interrupted gently. The system requires renewal every 90 days. A long silence followed. Then, softer, you knew this would happen, didn't you? I warned you to read the fine print, I replied. Naomi, please. The board review is in 2 hours. They think I've lost control. I'm sorry, Paula. But you didn't lose control today. You lost it when you decided I was expendable. I ended the call. My hand didn't shake. When you build something perfectly balanced, it doesn't collapse overnight. It crumbles inch by inch, until the people who thought they were in charge realized the foundation was never theirs. That afternoon, Hannah called again. You should see what's happening, she whispered. They brought in external auditors. The system logs show months of ignored errors. Raymond blamed Paula, Paula blamed IT. The board wasn't impressed. I listened quietly. They're talking about a full leadership reset. Half the department might go. Then maybe they'll finally learn what leadership costs, I said. After the call, I went for a walk along the river. The air was crisp, calm. My mind felt the same. Revenge was never the goal, it was correction. Precision. The removal of rot so something honest could grow. That evening, an email arrived from Argon's HR. Naomi, would you consider returning as a consultant to assist with operations recovery? Competitive rate. Immediate start. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. Thank you for your message. Unfortunately, Pierce Strategies is fully booked at this time. I sent it, then closed my laptop. Some lessons are best paid for, not taught. By September, news of Argon's downfall reached industry circles. Articles mentioned internal mismanagement and client loss due to failed transitions. My name wasn't in any of them, and I preferred it that way. Pierce Strategies was thriving. I'd hired 2 assistants and rented a modest office overlooking the city. Clients valued efficiency over drama, and that was what I gave them. One afternoon, I ran into Raymond at a trade expo. He looked older, gray at the temples, eyes heavy. Naomi, he said quietly. You really saw it coming, didn't you? I saw the cracks, I answered. You widened them. He sighed. Paula's gone. The board dissolved her role. Half the team quit. They might sell the department entirely. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it more than he realized. He hesitated. You don't seem angry. I'm not. Anger is loud. Precision is quiet. He nodded slowly. You win, Naomi. It was never a game, I said, then walked away. The lights of the convention floor shimmered on the polished tiles. As I left, I caught my reflection, steady, composed, and finally free from the shadows I once worked under. Letting them push me out had been the best move I ever made. 2 months passed before I heard another word from anyone at Argon. I'd just finished a client meeting when Hannah dropped by my office unannounced. She looked different, relieved, lighter somehow. They finally let Raymond go, she said, sitting down. The board called it necessary restructuring. Half the team is gone. The rest are working under an interim director from another firm. I listened, hands folded. They're offering retention bonuses, but everyone's planning exits. It's chaos. She hesitated, eyes meeting mine. You know, most of this wouldn't have happened if they'd just left you where you were. I smiled faintly. I know. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she said, "They deserve what's happening, but part of me feels sorry for the junior staff." "So do I said honestly. They trusted people who cared more about credit than competence. That's a hard lesson to watch." Before she left, Hannah slid a folder across my desk. "These are vendor contacts you built years ago. They're asking if you're available for private contracts." I glanced at the names and recognized everyone. Argon's loss was quietly becoming my foundation. I nodded. "Tell them yes. I'm available." Some collapses are loud. Others rebuild in silence. By winter, Pierce Strategies was running smoother than I'd dreamed. My days started early, with black coffee and city noise outside my office window. Every project ran on time. Every client paid in advance. But sometimes, I'd think about Argon, the long nights, the quiet triumphs, the meetings where I'd done the work and someone else had claimed it. I didn't miss it. I missed who I'd been before I learned how fragile loyalty could be. One evening, while reviewing a new proposal, I saw Paula's name in a news article. She'd joined a smaller firm as Director of Process Integration. Her quote read, "I believe collaboration is the key to success." I almost laughed. People like Paula never saw their own reflection, only the version that suited the room. Still, I felt no satisfaction, no need to see her fail further. What I had now was enough, a quiet office, stability, and freedom. When I locked up that night, snow was falling lightly over the city. I stood for a moment watching it cover the sidewalks in white. It struck me how easily the world resets itself. Even the coldest ruins disappear beneath new snow. The next year began with a call from Harbor and Kent's CEO. "Naomi, Argon's board just announced a merger," he said. "They're being absorbed by a competitor." I leaned back in my chair. I expected as much. He chuckled. "The new parent company wants an independent audit of their operations." Your name came up. I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to decline, go on with my own path. But curiosity whispered louder. "Send me the details," I said. A week later, I walked into Argon's familiar glass building for the first time in 14 months. The receptionist didn't recognize me. The logo had changed, so had the staff. The energy that once buzzed through those halls was gone. An auditor escorted me upstairs. As we passed the old operations floor, I saw empty desks, abandoned plants, dust gathering on forgotten shelves. It felt like visiting a museum of mistakes, every corner a quiet reminder that arrogance ages faster than experience. When we finished, the auditor asked, "How did such a solid system fall apart?" I smiled slightly. "By removing the person who understood how it worked." The audit report took 3 weeks. When it was done, the acquiring company sent me a letter of appreciation and a contract offer, an ongoing consulting partnership. Ironically, I now advised the same infrastructure that once dismissed me. But I didn't see it as revenge. It was evolution. Later that month, Hannah visited again. "You're part of the new oversight board?" she asked. "In a limited capacity," I said. "Mainly for restructuring recommendations." She smiled knowingly. "So, in the end, you got your department back?" "Not exactly," I replied. "I got its bones. And I learned which pieces are worth rebuilding." We sat by the window, the city stretched out below like a circuit board of light. "You know," she said softly, "you never raised your voice through any of it." I think that scared them more than anything. "Noise fades," I said. "Precision doesn't." She nodded. "You really did let them succeed just to watch it collapse, didn't you?" I didn't answer. Some truths are better left implied. The silence between us said enough. The fall had been theirs. The calm after was mine. Months later, Argon's brand disappeared completely, merged into the new company's portfolio. To the public, it was a smooth acquisition. Inside, it was a rescue mission disguised as progress. My firm continued to grow quietly. We focused on what others ignored: structure, accountability, foresight. Clients trusted me not because I promised perfection, but because I'd lived through failure and turned it into instruction. One Friday afternoon, while clearing emails, I found a message from Paula. It was short: "I understand now. I wasn't ready. But I've learned a lot. I hope you're well." I read it twice, then deleted it. There was nothing cruel about it. I simply had no reason to keep it. The following Monday, I signed a contract with a multinational client, my biggest yet. As I clicked send, a strange calm settled over me, the same feeling I'd had walking out of Argon that last night. Sometimes, revenge doesn't look like payback. It looks like peace. And peace, I realized, is the quietest victory of all. 6 months later, Pierce Strategies had doubled in size. We'd moved into a larger office, clean lines, glass walls, soft light. My new staff was young but eager to learn, and I made sure they understood one rule: competence before ambition. During a meeting, one of my analysts asked, "Naomi, how do you spot when a system's about to fail?" I thought of Argon, of the months when the air in that building had turned brittle with ego. When people start chasing titles instead of results, I said. That's the first warning sign. That evening, I walked through the office after everyone had gone. The hum of computers reminded me of my old department, only now the rhythm was steady, balanced. A message pinged on my phone, a news article. Argon Acquisition shuts down 2 departments following audit findings. The photo showed the new executives smiling beside the company logo, unaware of the history beneath their feet. I put the phone away. That chapter was finished. The story didn't belong to me anymore, it belonged to the silence that followed. Sometimes, survival isn't about fighting to stay. It's about knowing when to walk out and leave the building to collapse behind you. The following spring, I was invited to give a keynote at an industry summit. The topic: sustainable leadership in transitional companies. As I prepared, I thought back to the night I'd left Argon: no grand exit, no speech, just quiet precision. That moment had shaped everything since. On stage, I looked out at the audience of executives, analysts, and young managers. The greatest risk to any organization, I said, is mistaking confidence for competence. One is loud. The other builds things that last. When the session ended, several people came up to thank me. One woman said softly, "Your talk made me rethink how I lead." We just went through a similar situation. I smiled. Then you already understand what comes next: clarity. Later, at the networking dinner, a man from a venture firm offered to partner with Pierce Strategies. "You seem to have a talent for saving companies from themselves," he said. I thought of Paula and Raymond, of Argon's hollow offices. "Not saving," I replied. "Teaching." Teaching, I had learned, was the quietest form of power. Business grew faster than I expected. Within months, we had clients in 3 countries. My days filled with travel, meetings, and problem-solving, the kind of work that used to drain me now energized me. Still, every success carried a whisper of memory. Each time I fixed a failing process, I saw Argon's mistakes in its reflection. One evening, as I reviewed a contract, my assistant said, "You must feel proud. You turned a setback into an empire." I laughed softly. Empire's too grand a word. I just made something functional. But later, alone in my office, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The walls around me, the hum of productivity, the calm, it all came from one decision: to let go before being dragged under. I opened an old file labeled Argon. Inside were documents, emails, system notes, remnants of a past life. I deleted them one by one until the folder was empty. When I closed my laptop, the screen reflected my face in the dark glass. The woman looking back wasn't angry. She was precise, deliberate, and finally unburdened. Closure, I realized, isn't revenge. It's deletion. That summer, Harbour and Kent invited me to lead a full-scale transformation project, my largest contract yet. Their boardroom overlooked the same skyline I once stared at through Argon's windows. During one session, a junior manager asked, "How do you rebuild trust in a broken team?" "By replacing fear with clarity," I said. "People destroy what they don't understand. Teach them to understand." When the meeting ended, I stepped onto the balcony. The city stretched below, alive with traffic and light. Somewhere in that maze stood Argon's old headquarters, now leased by another firm. I remembered Paula's call, Raymond's disbelief, the hollow confidence that had consumed them. None of it felt bitter now. It felt distant, like watching a storm you'd already survived. My phone buzzed. A message from Hannah, "Just wanted to say thank you. You taught me more by staying silent than any speech could have." I smiled. Sometimes the ripple you leave behind is bigger than the wave you made. Every quiet decision, every restrained reply, it all adds up to a lesson. Precision wins long after noise fades. A year later, I returned to Argon's old building for a seminar. The company name was gone from the lobby, replaced by polished steel letters reading Westbridge Partners. As I waited for the elevator, a young receptionist said, "You used to work here, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "A long time ago." She smiled. "It must be strange, seeing it change." "It's not strange," I replied. "It's natural. Things that lose their balance fall so something stronger can stand." The elevator opened to a renovated floor, bright, minimalist, unfamiliar. None of the old furniture remained. It was as if Argon had never existed. During the seminar, I spoke about resilience, not revenge. About systems that survive because they evolve. No one in the room knew that the foundation beneath their new office was built from the ruins of a betrayal. As I left, I glanced at the skyline one last time. Everything I'd lost had led here, to a version of success that didn't need applause. Sometimes, the sweetest victory isn't watching others collapse. It's realizing you no longer need to. The next spring marked 5 years since I'd walked out of Argon. Pierce Strategies had grown into a respected name. We were known for fixing broken structures and teaching companies how to prevent collapse. I had built a quiet empire on lessons learned from arrogance and silence. One morning, while reviewing proposals, my assistant announced a visitor. "She doesn't have an appointment, but she says she used to work with you." It was Paula. She looked different, thinner, her confidence replaced by something softer. I invited her in. "I owe you an apology," she began. "I thought I understood leadership." "I didn't. I destroyed what you built, and I've spent years trying to rebuild my own career." I listened. There was no anger left in me, only clarity. "I was young," she continued. "Ambitious. I thought taking your place would prove my worth." "It did," I said gently. "Just not the way you hoped." She managed a faint smile. "You were always 2 steps ahead." "No," I corrected. "I just paid attention." When she left, I sat for a long moment staring at the closed door. Forgiveness wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, like every victory that mattered. Later that year, an international firm approached me about a partnership. They wanted Pierce Strategies to oversee global operations reform. It was the kind of opportunity that would have thrilled the younger version of me, the one who stayed late for recognition. Now, it simply felt right. During the contract review, I caught myself explaining system sustainability to a group of executives. They listened, taking notes. Somewhere in the back of the room, I saw a reflection of who I once was, hopeful, eager, trusting that competence would always be enough. When the meeting ended, one of them said, "You talk about structure like it's personal." It is, I said. Structure is what protects good people from bad leadership. They nodded, not fully understanding. Few ever did until they lost what they had built. That night, as I walked home through the city lights, I thought about Argon, not with bitterness but gratitude. If they hadn't pushed me out, I'd still be there, steady, silent, underappreciated. Their betrayal had freed me. And freedom, I realized, was the cleanest form of revenge. Years later, I received an invitation to an awards dinner. Pierce Strategies was nominated for Excellence in Operational Innovation. The host company? Westbridge Partners, the same firm that had absorbed Argon. I almost laughed when I saw the logo. The world had a sense of irony I would never get tired of. That evening, I arrived in a simple black dress, blending into the crowd. The hall shimmered with soft light and quiet music. I recognized none of the new executives, but they greeted me warmly. When my name was called, I stepped onto the stage. The presenter smiled. Naomi Pierce, for setting a new standard in corporate integrity and precision. The applause echoed faintly. I took the award, looked out at the audience, and said, "Perfection isn't about control, it's about understanding." When we forget that, systems fall apart. It wasn't a speech of triumph, it was a reminder. Afterward, I stood outside under the cool night air, the city glowing around me. Somewhere in that skyline, Argon's old blueprint lived on, refined, rebuilt, reborn. Sometimes, the ruins become your resume. In time, Pierce Strategies became self-sustaining. I trained new directors, people who valued integrity over ego. Watching them work reminded me of my younger self, before betrayal, before strategy turned cold. One afternoon, a young analyst asked, "How do you stay so calm when things go wrong?" I smiled. Because panic is loud, and loud never fixes anything. She nodded thoughtfully, jotting it down like advice worth framing. That evening, I sat by the window of my office, the city stretching out beneath fading sunlight. Everything I'd lost had returned, reshaped and purified by time. I thought about Paula, about Raymond, about the others who had once plotted to push me aside. None of them mattered now. The lesson had outlived them all. Success, I realized, wasn't a moment. It was a state of quiet certainty, a rhythm that no one else could disrupt once you found it. The company hummed below me like a living thing. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to simply breathe. Peace had stopped being a destination. It had become my routine. 5 years after the award, I decided to step back. Pierce Strategies could run without me now. I sold part of my shares to the team I'd trained, keeping only enough to watch them flourish. On my final day, I walked through the office one last time. Desks were filled, voices low and focused, the same calm efficiency I had once dreamed of building. A younger version of myself would have stayed for control. The woman I had become understood that legacy grows best when you let it breathe. As I reached the door, my assistant handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note signed by the staff, for teaching us that quiet doesn't mean weak, and grace is the sharpest weapon. I smiled, folded the note, and slipped it into my coat pocket. Outside, the sun was setting over the skyline that had once held both my rise and my fall. Walking away didn't feel like loss. It felt like mastery. Because in the end, the collapse I watched wasn't theirs alone, it was every version of me that needed to prove something. Now, I no longer did.